Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Tom and Jerry, the ultimate game of cat and mouse for the NES, brought to us by High Tech Expressions and developed by Software Creations, the same developer that gave us lovely games like Silver Surfer and the underrated puzzle game Solstice. Tom and Jerry and Tuffy, or Tom and Jerry the Ultimate Game of Cat and Mouse, is a rather simplistic action platformer that has a few flaws, mostly in the hit detection and other annoyances that you'll come across during the course of the overall gameplay. It could have been a rather standard kind of action platformer, but in the end just becomes more annoying the longer you play it. In the game, you're controlling Jerry, who's trying to save his cousin Tuffy from Tom, who ends up kidnapping him. This is all explained in the very brief intro to the game before we jump into the first level. Each level in the game is sort of a maze, trying to figure out the right path. There's usually a lot of dead ends and plenty of enemies that are going to get in your way. At the bottom of the screen you have your current lives count, the score, and how much health Jerry has left. The item in the center is the currently equipped item, which at this point is our default weapon, which we'll be using for most of the game. There's a couple of different weapons you can end up finding throughout the game that can aid you, but they are limited. You can only use them for a certain number of times before you end up losing them and have to recollect them. However, for the most part, the default weapon works rather well against most enemies in the game, so I usually just end up sticking with that. The paths and levels I'll be taking is pretty much the most straightforward path, though there may be a couple of shortcuts that I don't end up finding throughout the course of this adventure. The worst thing about the game is just trying to stop yourself from getting hurt. You get knocked back when you run into enemies or even certain objects. Doesn't necessarily mean they've damaged you. Sometimes you just get knocked back, and then if you get hit again you may end up losing health, or if you run into the wrong enemies or different hazards like spikes or thumbtacks, you'll end up losing health that way. But just because you get knocked back doesn't mean you've necessarily lost any of your health, so always keep an eye on it at the bottom. You can also collect cheese in the levels in order to replenish that health, if you're collecting multiple small cheeses or one of the big ones in order to get some of that health back. After traveling through a pretty convoluted level, we've made it to the bottom portion here, taking in a couple of spiders in these webs that slow you down as you're jumping through them. We're then going to climb up the pipe and now head over to the left side. Walk across this spot watching out for a few more enemies and then climb up the next set of pipes so that you can get up to this platform. Just keep following this path along until you make it to the very top and finish up level number 1. Level number 2 is still more of the convoluted maze kind of setup. However, it's a lot smaller quarters to deal with, so avoiding enemies is pretty darn challenging during this level. In fact, just climbing up this ladder here, you'll see a big wave of water that starts coming down towards us. So you have to quickly get up the ladder and then get away from it before you end up getting damaged by it. Most enemies you will have to stop for a second in order to take them out, or even just stop them from moving for a period of time. Certain enemies, like these guys here, the ones that aren't moving, will actually have to be hit and then they'll tuck their head back inside their shell, allowing you to get past. The ones that are moving, though, you can just take out with a couple of weapon hits. There's also the very annoying snails that move back and forth slowly, of course, and you have to hit them a couple of times in order to get them to go back into their shell. However, there can be false alarms because when the snail turns around, it goes back into its shell as well, but at that point it's not able to be passed, so make sure that you've stopped the shell and it's not just turning around before you decide to make your break for it and get past them. Just keep working your way along the various paths. As long as you're making progress upwards for the most part, you know that you're making progress in the level. There's a lot of different dead ends that you'll end up running into as well while trying to explore. The game is broken up into 5 different levels that have 2 levels in each, and the third level being the boss encounter against Tom for that particular world. When we made it into this upper right corner, we finish up the stage and move on to that first boss encounter. The bosses for the most part just have you firing your projectiles at Tom, and there's a variety of different styles of these bosses as we're doing this. For example, here, you have to make sure you don't land in the water. It's instant death here. Tom is flicking water droplets at you, as well as sometimes spitting at you, but you gotta keep making jumps high enough so you're able to hit him. When you see the stars around his head, that means the battle's over, but you still have to be careful. You can still end up falling into the water, or in other boss fights when there's other stuff going on, you can still be damaged and end up dying from it. So until the screen fades away, stay on your toes. Next up is World 2, and here we're in the kitchen. We start off by heading up a series of platforms upwards and then head on down over here to where this rope is. There is fall damage in the game, so keep that in mind when falling down to lower platforms, which can be a bit obnoxious. For example, I'm doing that by kind of stepping on the platform just a couple of floors down so I don't end up getting fall damage as I made my way to the bottom floor here. From here, we head on over to the very far right side where we'll be able to get up and start climbing on top of these bottles. Use your projectile weapon to take out the various flies that are buzzing around so that you have an easier shot of jumping up. It's very annoying in this game when you're trying to make certain platform jumps and then you end up running into an enemy, knocking you backwards just slightly and causing you to have to redo areas. In the stove area, once we get over here, be very careful of not only stuff popping out of the pan here, but also the little flames on the bottom there burning. Climb up the rope at the end, continuing along the path with a few more bugs coming your way, and as you are making your way to the top eventually, we'll be able to finish up the stage here. World 2, Stage 2 is an interesting level. Here we're either inside of a tree or inside of walls. There's a bunch of bugs that you actually have to use as platforms to bounce your way up, which is kind of cool. There's also the army men soldiers, toy soldiers walking around that you have to deal with. Maybe they're army ants. I'm not sure exactly what they were going for here. For the most part, they're just a nuisance that we can easily avoid or take out with a couple of projectiles. For the most part, you have to work your way up, and you can do so by bouncing off a lot of these various caterpillars that are throughout the area. There is a good amount of annoying enemies flying down from the ceiling, so be careful of them. Use this caterpillar to bounce up so that you can continue along this path and along these platforms. Thankfully, this is one of the more straightforward levels overall, at least as far as this game is concerned. When you make it to the very top, you have a couple of long jumps with the enemy on the platform right beforehand, which can end up knocking you down, so be careful of that guy and finish up the level. Moving on to the second boss battle. Now for this one, what you need to do is use these platforms to get up into this upper right corner and hit this beehive, and when the bee pops out, you need to hit the bee again. It can hurt you when it pops out, but when you deliver one hit to it, it ends up going over and attacking Tom for whatever reason. Once you've hit Tom with all three of the bees from the hive, the battle's over and you're moving on to World 3. World 3 has a very easy path through it if you can pull it off. It's a bit difficult and may take you a time or two to kind of get used to it, but I'm going to use it here for the purpose of showing off this interesting shortcut through this world. As you can see, you have all these different leaves that are blowing around, and when you bounce into them, you can actually bounce on them multiple times in a row, and you can use this to get over the various gaps. So instead of having to travel throughout this level, you can just bounce off these leaves and easily get across, finishing the stage in just a matter of moments. The next level is a fire-filled level and is a very difficult one to traverse. It starts off at the top with a bunch of little water droplets that are starting to come down, but as you progress through the level, the flames start to shoot up as you get closer and closer to the bottom. A large portion of what makes this level very annoying is these little openings with these things that fly up. You have to time it just right so that you're able to bypass them when they disappear, which is a very brief moment before another one ends up spawning and trying to get up. For example, you have to bounce off of this bird nest and fly over to the left side at just the right moment so you're able to get past that, and then the flame right on the opposite side. Because of the way they are structured, sometimes you'll have them coming from not only on the platform you're on, but also from below, from a different spot. So you have to be really careful when making it through certain areas like this one here, where you have a very brief moment to get through without accidentally getting hit. Once you make it to the very bottom floor, you have a very small little opening for you to travel through and a whole bunch of annoying flames. You can't take them out using your projectiles, you just have to wait for them to dissipate for just a moment and then go past. However, it can be a little bit difficult to tell exactly when they dissipate because of all the flickering and flashing of the graphics here, so just try to take your time and take those moments when you can. They're only down for a few brief moments anyway, which makes it even more difficult to get through that area. Once you are past it though, it's time for the next boss fight, and here is a very annoying Tom fight, actually one of the more difficult ones for sure, as you have flames coming from the platform that you're on. It can be difficult at times to avoid these flames that are coming up while still focusing on throwing your projectiles at Tom on the opposite side. Just keep kind of jumping, short jumps, high jumps, whatever you need to keep enough of your projectiles going while also avoiding these nasty flames. It'll take a while, but once he is done, we're moving on to World 4. The beginning of world number 4 is awesome, as we have a giant actual Nintendo system and we get to even platform on a controller and a VCR while making our way up to the top here. Be very careful throughout this level with these bouncing annoying pink balls that keep bouncing towards you. They can be difficult to not only get around, but also do end up appearing right at the edge of platforms, waiting for you to get knocked back and dropped off, so you have to do a lot of backtracking. Continue along the top portion of the level until you make it to this spot here. Then use the platforms to slowly drop your way down to the bottom section, and then over to the right. You have to actually press up at the mouse hole, and then you're able to move on to the next level, which is a very annoying stage. Here you have a series of electric fields that are going to be moving along the different electrical wires here. You have to first start off by grabbing the drill, which is an item you can equip as an alternative to your weapon, though you won't be able to take enemies out with it. You'll then have to use the drill to open up all the secret walls and passages. You can kinda tell which walls are the ones you're able to as they flicker a little bit, especially when you get near them or run into them, but you have to do this throughout the whole level. And while you're doing it, after you open up a wall, after a few moments it will close back up, so keep that in mind while going through the area. This would be relatively simple if you also weren't having to worry about the electricity that's running through the wires, as this can be actually really difficult at times to just barely get around. One other annoying aspect about this is that you actually have your weapon switch back to the default one every time you use the drill. I guess they were trying to go for to make sure that you always had still your weapon after going through a new area, so you didn't have to switch and worry about that, but since I end up using the drill far more than I end up using the weapon during this level, it would have been nice to just leave it on where I had it. Be careful right here, you have to quickly open up the wall to get through before the electricity comes your way. Thankfully, we're almost to the end of this stage here, and we're going to climb up this rope and get to the top. Once here, wait for the bug to go past so that you can jump on the platform safely, and then continue along this small little corridor like we've been the whole time, and jump up to the very top platform. Open up the wall and then jump to the very top platform here, and head on over to the right to finish up the stage. For this battle against Tom, he ends up showing his face and then throws a series of firecrackers. He appears at the top, then middle, and then the bottom, and he does this path repeatedly, so it's usually easy to tell where he's going to be next. The pattern I usually like to do is attacking him when he's at the middle level. So, what I do is attack his face, and then immediately run away from him to the bottom platform, jump back up once they have dissipated, and climb all the way to the upper left corner, jumping over one of the firecrackers, and by the time I do all this and land back, his face has reappeared at the middle platform. This may not be the most effective or easiest way to take care of this boss, but I find this nice little groove to be relatively easy to keep following, and after a little bit of time he goes down and we're moving on to the 5th and final world of the game. World number 5 starts off with a bathroom-themed stage. You're starting right outside of the tub. Be very careful though when you go to the right. There are some little spiked tacks on the ground which will end up hurting you, and since they kind of blend in, they can be a little bit difficult to see. Head on up and then start climbing up, I guess with his shampoo bottles. You can then climb up this nozzle hose for the shower head, and then get up to the very top and continue along to the right side. When you make it over here past this plant and keep going, and then you're going to run across a series of platforms here. A few of them have items to grab to replenish your health if you need it. Drop down, thankfully you won't end up taking damage from that little bit of a fall, then head to the left and drop down again. Be careful here because you may accidentally take a little bit of damage when falling. Then you can just run across the right side or go all the way to the bottom and run over to the right. Either way, the lower right corner is the location of the mouse hole where we move on to level 2 of World 5. Since we've seen a lot of interesting themes thus far in the game, we finish it up here with a haunted house type of level. I guess we're back in the walls of the house, but this time it's filled with evil ghosts and Dracula cat things that are flying around. Either way, this is a little bit difficult of a level. It's the only one where you have to find another item before you can make it to the exit. I don't know why they decided to not have this in any other level, so it kind of caught me off guard the first time I was playing this stage. Work your way over to the right here and climb on top of this camera. From it, you have to do a nicely timed jump, and you can make it to these hanging nails. Now, one thing that's really annoying in this game is when you're on a nail or rope or whatever, when you're trying to move on it, you can only go up and down, not left and right on it. But sometimes you have to be on the edge of the rope or chain in order to make the jump to the next one. So keep that in mind when you're on these, that you can actually like hug the left or right side of it and have a little bit more space closer to wherever you're trying to jump. When you do climb up that chain, jump over to the left and run across all this area with all the spider webs and you'll find the key. This is obviously the item that we need to collect in order to make it to the exit. Like I said, I don't know why they decided to have that for this level, and you don't even open up a door. From the chain, now head to the right side, climb up, watch out for a series of nails, and finish up the stage. The final battle here against Tom has him appearing from 3 possible locations. He also uses his hands to throw out a series of rockets that will dash across the screen, sometimes going off screen and then returning on one of the 3 levels, either the top, middle, or bottom. The face can only appear on the left, right, and top portion of the screen. It won't appear at the bottom. At least, I've never seen it appear there. Your goal is, of course, to attack the face whenever it does appear while dodging all the series of rockets that are blasting towards you. Because it's difficult and you don't have a whole lot of time to actually land hits on Tom when he does appear, this battle can be relatively lengthy and a bit of a pain, but it's actually easier than, let's say, the fire boss that we dealt with earlier, as the projectiles are much easier to deal with. It'll probably take you a little bit of time in order to slowly drain his health enough and finish him off, but once he goes down, you can enjoy the brief ending to Tom and Jerry on the NES. So, there you have it, a small little ending, a little bit of text, and then the credits with Tom, Jerry, and Tuffy all being pretty happy, it looks like, at the end. Overall, Tom and Jerry is not the worst playing NES platformer there is. There's still plenty of worse ones out there, and even ones based on cartoons, like The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. But with that said, if you've never tried it out, Tom and Jerry really isn't one that you're going to be missing out on. But with that, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.